Can the Soldano SLO-30 stack up to a Marshall icon? Today we're going to find out. So we recently got in a Soldano SLO-30 for one of our VIP customers. And I said, well, while we have this thing, we might as well do a shootout, because I'm just going to front load this video and tell you, I think it might be one of the most incredible amplifiers I've ever played. I'm a vintage Marshall guy. I have a big collection of vintage Marshalls. I have a Plexi, I have an old Jubilee, but one of my favorites of all time is my 1977 2203 JMP 100 watt. And this particular amp is sort of my desert island. I could live with this thing forever because everything just sounds good. And if you don't know a lot about those late 70s JMPs, they're master volume amps, and they're essentially the same circuit as the JCM 800. The difference is the late 70s models still have a lot of mustard caps, which mine does have, and they just have sort of a unique tone. From the factory, they came with 6550 tubes, which were a little weird for the American market because everyone was used to Marshalls using EL84s. Some people love that. Zach Wild is famous for using these type of amps with the 6550 tubes because they have a little bit more bottom end and more sizzle on the top. I'm more of a traditional guy. I've taken those out and put EL34s in my amp and rebiased it accordingly so that it is very traditional Marshall. But I immediately plugged it up side by side with this new SLO-30 and was blown away with how good the Soldano sounds. And for the record, I have only played one Soldano ever in my life, and it was actually in Utah when I was just a kid. I was out there visiting my aunt, and they had one in a guitar center. And I still to this day remember how amazed I was at playing that SLO 100 and just the massive, massive nature of that amp. The new SLO-30 does not disappoint. My first thought was, well, with this being a 30 watt amp, it's probably not going to have the balls of a 100 watt, or maybe not that just sort of guttural punch. Let me tell you, this amp is absolutely brutal. I'm going to say for the record, although it probably will not come through whatever device you're watching this on, the low end of the SLO-30 eclipses my 77 Marshall. And that is a very bold statement because on my 77, I frequently run the bass at 4 or lower just because it is so fat, and you just have to do that to rein it in. So unbelievably impressed with the SLO-30. And honestly, the clean channel, and specifically the crunch mode on the clean channel, might actually be my favorite part of the amp. And I know all the traditionalists are going to throw shade at me in the comments. Feel free to do so. But the way that the crunch channel sounds is so similar, but yet better and different than my 77 Marshall. It's just got incredible dynamics. The three-dimensional sound is just incredible, sustained for days. And when you go to the Overdrive channel on the Soldano, it rips your face off. Sustain is probably the best of any amp I've ever played, and the harmonic content is just perfect. Like it's you can almost play the harmonics like its own instrument. Like it's going to feedback when you want it to feedback, and you can control it. We're doing everything in the studio today, totally live. So I have it hooked up to my 412 cabinet with a mix of 30 watt greenback H38 speakers, as well as two vintage 30s. So I have it mic'd up with a 57 and an AKG C414, and I'm using the 414 in the figure 8 mode, so it captures a little bit of that room ambiance and the thunk of the amp. I've got the AKG sort of to the edge of the cone, so it's a little darker, and the 57 is right at the edge of the dust cap. So I'm going to pan those a little bit in stereo. I would recommend using headphones when you get to the playing portion of this video. And if you want to go there now and skip the talking, just look down below in the chapters. We'll have a point where you can jump straight to the playing if that's what you're in here for. So last bit of commentary I will say before we get straight into playing the amplifier, was blown away by how big it sounds at 30 watts. The clean channel with crunch might be my favorite thing. Overdrive channel has the absolute best lead sound I think I have ever played. And the effects loop works, like legitimately works. And I've heard so many traditional Soldano owners say this about, the vintage models from the 80s and 90s, that the effects loop just sucked. The new one is great. In fact, I'm going to run an HX stomp in the loop on some parts just to give a little bit of delay or maybe some flange or something like that to add a little ear candy. But one of the best sounding effects loops that I have played in a high gain amp, and relatively quiet as well. So comparatively to the JMP, things about the JMP that are different: it's of course a much lower gain amplifier. You've only got 3 stages of gain in the JMP, which I think the Soldano has 5. I can fact check myself and put it on the screen if I'm wrong. But the JMP, very traditional Marshall sound, upper mid bite. It's going to have a lot of dynamics, a lot of punch. Soldano starts there, like on the clean channel with Overdrive, but it quickly gets into just absolute bone-crushing, degent territory on the Overdrive side. In fact, I personally don't even like running the gain higher than about 4 on the Overdrive side. It just gets way too much. The only time I would roll more gain than that is if I was just doing like a really blistering singing solo, and then maybe I would go to like 6 or 7. But if you turn the gain to 10 on this amp, it's nuclear destruction. It's way too much. I also love the addition of the bright cap on the clean side, because it does allow you to get kind of that Marshall-y thing when you're running in the crunch channel. So you get those upper mids coming through and brightening the sound and tightening up the low end. So overall, I'm super impressed. You be the judge. I would love to hear in the comments what you think, but let's transition straight to the playing, and you can be the judge of, do you think this amp stacks up to an iconic Marshall that is my favorite amp on the planet? So up first, let's get our baseline in place. So since we're shooting this SLO-30 out with what is, in my opinion, one of the most classic Marshalls of all time, let's start with the Marshall so we can kind of get our heads wrapped around what kind of tone and sort of dynamics we've got going on here. So just a quick rundown of the setup I've got on this amp. I've got preamp volume, which is gain, around 7. I find that that's kind of the sweet spot for the amp. It sounds really good boosted, and I will do that later in this video, but for now, it is literally my guitar straight into the amplifier, no effects in front of it. I've got the master on like 1, but what you cannot realize is that even on 1, this thing is into like the 90 plus dB range. It is insanely loud. Treble, I've got right about 7, mid about the same. Bass on this is right about 5. I actually brought it up a little bit to equal it out a little more with the Soldano, even though I typically run it closer to 4. And then presence at about 7 as well. So those are our baseline settings. I'm going to run through just a couple of basic riffs just for you can kind of get an idea of the feel of the amp and the tone. But what I find just most significantly different before we get into the SLO, the Marshall just has like a crang to it that I don't know how to describe. If you love Marshalls and you play Marshalls, you just get it. That is one thing I don't find in the Soldano. Not necessarily a bad thing, it's a different amp. But the Marshall just kind of has that crang and a little more looseness to it. So really well suited to like, your classic Van Halen riffs. Like just, I don't know, man, like every time I play that, it just feels good. It sounds good. Everything about the reaction of the amp is just what I expect to come from a Marshall. So definitely more in that what I would consider medium gain kind of range, unless you hit it with a boost. These things love tube screamers, treble boosters, SD1s, like any of that is going to work really, really well. So I'm going to run through a couple more riffs here just to kind of give you some baseline. Then we'll flip over to the Soldano. I'm not running any effects again in front of it right now, although I may later in the video. I know we're going to hit it with a boost, but we may add some like delay in post or something like that. If we do, I'll put it on the screen just so you have it. Just incredible, man. I could play that the rest of my life and be totally happy. It's my favorite amp on the planet. So just to compare gain levels, I am going to take it all the way to the top on the gain on 10, or if you're a Spinal Tap fan, you know, maybe you want to write 11 on there, dad joke. And so we're just going to get a feel for how that reacts. I don't necessarily love the amp there. I would prefer to boost it with something in front, but just for giggles here, I'm going to put it on 10 and we'll see what happens. All right, here it is, wide open, a little noisier. So immediately the amp's a little chewier, a little more compressed, a little more brown, if I dare say. And it will do that all day if I let it go. That's one thing I love about the Marshall, just the harmonics bloom, but they never get totally out of control. So it's a lot of fun. So now that we kind of have a baseline idea of what the Marshall sounds like, let's flip over to the SLO and have some fun there. Okay, so now we're going to swap over to the SLO-30, and I'm going to start out very quickly giving you a glimpse of what the clean channel sounds like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because honestly, who buys one of these for the clean channel? I don't know, maybe you're a psychopath. No offense, but that's not what this amp is about. So we'll do a couple of quick clips with the clean channel, and then we're gonna get straight into the crunch mode on the clean side. So for this clean setup, I've got the preamp gain on the normal channel on 8. These do go to 11, by the way, so 8 is not the same 8 that's like on my Marshall. So I've got an 8, almost straight up and down on the tone controls. Bass is on like 6.5. Mid is on like 4.5, and then 6 on the treble. Depth is on 5, and presence is on 6. So really kind of neutral tone settings, but here we go. So first of all, with a neck pickup on a Strat, I mean, it's got a really nice crang. I've heard that John Mayer actually does, I guess he's a psychopath, because I've heard he does use like the clean side of the SLO a little more, but it does have kind of a jangly thing if you want to get, you know, for the blues. So it's kind of cool. You know, again, not really something I would buy this amp for, but the clean is surprisingly okay. Even more complex chords and stuff kind of come through nice. So it's neck and bridge pickup there, neck only. So if you needed an amp for a gig and you actually had to have a clean channel to go back and forth with, you can do it. But when I get to the crunch channel and show you what you can do with just the volume control, you might decide that you don't need a clean channel. So let's switch over really quickly to the crunch side and dive in there. Okay, so we've got the crunch dialed in. I do want to be upfront. I've got the bright switch on. I prefer it with the bright switch on. Maybe I'll do a quick clip of what it sounds like without it, but it does have more of that Marshall-y kind of mid-forward character. I set the preamp gain to 6, and I've brought the master down to about 2, a little over 2, because it gets pretty loud pretty quick on the overdrive side. Outside of that, tone stack not really changed. I bumped the treble up just a little bit and a little bit more presence to get a little bit more bite. But outside of that, let's dive in and see what this thing sounds like. Dude, this is one of those things where I wish you could be in the room, because you will never understand through a phone or a computer or whatever you're watching this on what that feels like, man. Like just the punch this thing has is incredible. A little bit more hollow in the mid than the JMP. Marshall, I guess that's the best way I could put it. Still kind of has an upper end bite, but it's got a little more kind of a vowel-ish hole in the mid-range and just a ton of low end. Like if I wanted to take the depth up and the bass up, I mean, we could just rattle pictures and stuff off the wall. It's way too much, to be honest. But gosh, this thing just sounds so freaking good. Especially for that kind of like light medium gain stuff that I just love, especially for classic rock, 80s rock. Just sounds so fantastic. And again, with a boost, if you want it in front of that, you can make this a clean channel too. So this is back what I was kind of telling you about with the volume control. So like if I want to dig in, you've got it. But if I back the volume control just barely off to about 7.5, like there's your clean channel. And honestly, I feel like this sounds a lot better than the clean setting, because in this mode, you've got a little bit more drive, a little bit more harmonics going on, and it reacts great to your volume control. Like it doesn't get dark or nasally like some amps. It's just beautiful. And then you can dial it up. So absolutely killer. I'm gonna go crank the gain up a little bit more because I like the gain somewhere around like 8 on this particular crunch channel, and we'll play some familiar riffs. And again, you guys just enjoy and tell us what you think in the comments. All right, so let's give this a whirl. It's no words needed. And again, man, I wish you could be in the room. Like the way this thing moves air is just absolutely incredible. So, you know, you can keep this same sort of crunch thing going. I'm just going to take it all the way to 10 on the crunch just to show you kind of what you can get into. And again, very similar gain structure to like my 77 in this range. It's just that perfect medium gain. And if you wanted to throw a little overdrive or boost in front of it, it's just perfect for a solo. So let's take it all the way to, excuse me, I said 10, 11, since Soldano is so hardcore, and we'll see what happens. Oh my God. It's just so good, man. It is so freaking good. Can you see the dynamics there too? Like when I'm bringing my volume down, it's like I've got a freaking clean channel in my volume control and in my hands. It's all about the attack and the dynamics with this amp. And even on 11, it cleans up, and it's manageable. It's dynamic. It's reactive. I don't know. Pick another great adjective to describe how awesome this amp is. Hands down, I'm convinced the clean channel on the Overdrive is the coolest part of this amplifier. Hate me if you wish. Now let's go to the Degent side of the full Overdrive and just compare and see how absolutely out of control that side of the amp gets. All right, here we go. So we're now on the Overdrive channel, some housekeeping and settings. First of all, I brought the Overdrive gain down to 3 because, as you're gonna hear, even 3 is pretty intense. Like, it's actually gonna be more gain than what we had on the previous channel. I brought the treble up a bit and the presence, and I bumped the mids back just a hair. It does get quite a bit more mid forward on this channel. Almost can be a little bit nasally if you don't dial it in right. So I have adjusted that. I may do a couple more tweaks as we go, but let's just see where we are for a baseline. God, it sounds good. I'm gonna give it a little bit more volume, kind of even it out with where we were on the clean channel. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty close in terms of volume, and I've got it at like 2 1/4. So again, if you think 30 watts isn't enough for you, it is uncomfortable in this room. Like, my ears will ring when we finish this. It's probably pushing close to 100 decibels at this point, if not over in some cases. And it's on like freaking 2 1/4 on the amp, on the master. So incredible, you know, volume that comes out of 30 watts. Yeah, let's keep playing. Dude, it's just, oh my God. And I keep saying, like, I think I love the crunch side better, but when I play this, it's just wild, man. Like, I could play a gig with this amp and absolutely be in heaven. I mean, I don't know. I think it is now in the running to compete with my 77 in terms of just the coolest, most inspiring amp that I've played. So let's just play a couple more little licks and see what we got. Just killer. I'm going to throw a little delay on here, by the way. So as I mentioned earlier, recap, I've got my HX Stomp in the loop. So I'm going to throw just a little kiss of tape echo on here just to give it a little bit of that ear candy. And I want you to kind of pay attention to just how nice this effects loop sounds. So there you go. I don't know what to say. You got to play one. It's just that good. It is incredible. And at this point, I think we need to just take the 2 amps, I'm gonna play them side by side with each other. We'll pick a couple of the same rips. I'll pan back and forth between the two. If I'm using any effects, I'll put that on screen, or maybe I'll just throw some in post on the Marshall just so it's tit for tat. But it's gonna be a great shootout. This is the fun part. Remember, you gotta tell us in the comments, which would you pick and why? Okay, so now it's time to tell us, what do you think? How did the SLO-30 stack up to the iconic Marshall? So I listened back to some of the tracks just before I came and did this final wrap up. And here's my take. I am emotionally attached to my Marshall. I always will be. It's my favorite amp of all time. So even listening to the tracks, I do think, for especially the chunky rhythm parts, like I still lean a little more Marshall in terms of like what just my ideal sound is. That being said, I did prefer the lead tones of the SLO, and I prefer just the overall flexibility of this amp. So emotionally, I probably give a slight edge to my Marshall. Practically, and for basically every other factor on a rating sheet, the SLO is the better amplifier. I mean, just be honest, man. You've got unbelievable gain. You can play any type of hard rock music all the way to classic rock you want. You've got this really cool crunch feature on the clean channel now, the bright switch, an effects loop that works. It's a smaller amp. It's a lot lighter. Like I can't do this with my Marshall. It's 30 watts. So even though it's an extremely loud 30 watts, and to give you comparison, those last clips, I had my Marshall on like 1.5. I had this one on like 2 3/4, and they were the same volume. So 30 watts, like don't discount how loud this thing can get. So when you put all that together, and the fact that this thing is gonna hold its value probably just as well as my vintage Marshall, I mean, it's hard to really say why, if you're just picking one amp, like this would be the amp. If I had to give away my entire Marshall collection and just replace it, I probably would take this. hands down. So I don't know. Everything's opinions. I would love to hear yours in the comments. Also, if you don't know about us, Buy or Borrow Music is an exclusive VIP membership club for musicians that allows you to borrow instruments, gear, accessories, all on demand for a very simple subscription fee. We start out at $25 a month. And if you get anything that you're trying and you love it, you can buy it with one click. We even give you rewards points and other discounts toward those purchases. So we're a small business. We're really trying to change the way that musicians get their gear. So check us out. I'm going to put a link in the comments, or excuse me, the description here. So give us a look if you're interested in trying any of this gear or becoming a member of our VIP club where you can get really cool stuff like this. Give us a look. We would love to have you on board and be a part of our journey to fundamentally change the way that musicians get their gear. If you haven't already, give us a like, a subscribe, help us get this content in front of other people because your support matters. Tell us in the comments everything that you would say about this shootout, and we hope to see you back next time.